Well, good morning, Crave Student Ministries. Welcome to another encouragement vlog video for you all. Man, I hope you're watching these, and I hope they are encouraging you. And I hope what they're encouraging you to is to live out your identity as the people of God and as the children of God. So today we're actually in Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 through 42, and again dealing with the Sermon on the Mount. So here's the scripture. You've heard that it was said, eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Okay, so the interesting thing about this scripture is this, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's actually Old Testament law, right? And some of these that he's been dealing with were not Old Testament law. They were basically Mishnah or teachings of the Jews. And so this stuff here is Old Testament law. And the idea behind it, it sounds really gross. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And you think, man, there's going to be a lot of toothless and eyeless people walking around. But this actually was a law that was intended to allow justice, but not let it move into vengeance, right? So the original idea behind this law from the heart of God is that if you accidentally slam my finger in the car door, right? Then if I want justice for that, then I can slam your finger in the car door. What I can't do is take your head and slam it in the car door, right? So that's the idea, that we don't have to one-up each other, which is kind of how the world works, right? When escalation, if you poke me in the chest, I have to shove you in the chest, and I shove you in the chest, and then you have to poke me in the eye, and off we go. So the idea here is to allow justice to happen, but also to keep it from moving in to vengeance. That's the original law. But listen to some of Jesus's things, right? Jesus says, if someone strikes you on the cheek, I want you to just give them the other one. If someone forces you to walk with them a mile, I want you to walk with them 2. If someone sues you and takes your tunic, I just go ahead and give them your cloak also. If somebody takes your outer garment, go ahead and give them the next layer also, right? Now, what's interesting here is there's some tongue-in-cheek going on here, right? Jesus is being a little not sarcastic. That's not the word, but he's being a little tongue-in-cheek. It's kind of like, okay, listen, if somebody is over a position over you and they're gonna slap you, and they're gonna have enough courage to slap you, go ahead and give them the other cheek. Go ahead, right? I mean, you slap me once, you might as well go ahead and slap me twice. Also, he says, look, if somebody is going to take one of your garments, go ahead and give them the other one. You can have all my clothes if you want it. It's going to get embarrassing at some point, but you can have all my clothes if you want it. But the point is, if you fight violence or aggression with violence and aggression, you're going to get more violence and aggression. And what he's really saying is, what if we became a people that didn't worry about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth? What happens if you and I fix our need for vengeance in our own hearts, our needs to be even in our own hearts? What happens if we start there, right? And so that's what he's kind of getting at. there's another side to this too, right? Where some of the analogies that he gives, like this idea of walking 1 mile, go ahead and walk with them 2. Well, he's alluding to Roman occupation, because Roman soldiers had the right to come into a town that they have taken over, and they could come into your house and say, Darren, I want you to carry my armor for me. And I would have to do it for a mile. And then after a mile, most people would drop it and go, now it's yours, whatever, right? Well, Jesus says, you know what? They're going to force you to do it for a mile. What happens if you do it for 2? It's just a different way of thinking about power. It's a different way of thinking about our need to be right, our need to win, all of those things. And Jesus is really messing with that here. He says, give to the one who asks. Don't turn away from someone who needs to borrow from you. Man, that's a totally different take on all of this, right? He goes, look, instead of trying to be a people that are always trying to make sure everything's fair, always trying to make sure everything's even, so that we're never mistreated, we're never, we never end up with less than someone else. He says, what happens if we become a people that generously share of the King's goodness? What if you and I become a people that generously share of the King's goodness? But here's the other thing I want you to check. Because when it says, what happens, well, let me say it this way. What happens if justice becomes our course of action and not vengeance? What happens if being good to people and being just to people becomes our course of action and not vengeance? But the question is, whose justice are we talking about? Are we talking about my justice? And again, I'm going to challenge you in the Sermon on the Mount. There's only one person's anything that he's talking about, always. It's the King's. We're talking about the King's justice. So, when you look at it, it's the King's justice, not ours. So if somebody slaps me on the cheek, because I know where I am and where I sit in the kingdom, I don't represent me. I represent the King. So I will give them the other cheek. Go ahead. If they want to take my cloak or my tunic, I'll give them my cloak also. Go ahead. I don't have anything to worry about. I don't have anything to fight for. I don't need to fight for position, because I'm in the King's kingdom. I will tell you this, most of my life, especially my younger years, and by my younger years, I probably mean my first 30, this is not an easy lesson for me. I grew up in a tough neighborhood. It wouldn't have looked like that to people who grew up in it, but I went to tough schools. I went to tough environments. I grew up fighting. I didn't know a whole lot better. And if you were going to take something of mine, it was going to cost you. So I grew up in a lot of my life fighting. When I got into high school and junior high and things, I began to wrestle and play football and have an outlet a little bit more. But it's interesting because I spent a lot of my life trying to make sure that things were fair to me. And as I look back on it, if I had spent more time not just worried about what I was fair for me to have, I probably would have treated a lot more people better, right? When I look back at my life and I think, I kept myself from being mistreated, but I actually mistreated them, and I mistreated them, and I mistreated them. And so one of the things that I think Jesus is trying to bring out in the Sermon on the Mount is that when you and I live from the heart of the King, your and I's identity gets lost in the identity of the King. But also, our need to fight for our identity gets lost in the identity of the King. So I want to encourage you that with that this week. May you go, church, and I mean this as wonderfully as I can say it. May you go this week and dare to lose yourself, your own human identity, and be wrapped up in the identity as a child of God, as a servant of the King, who is the Most High God, with Jesus Christ seated at the right hand of God in full authority of heaven and earth. God bless you, Crave. You guys have a great week.